Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome to another beautiful and spectacular game played by the most powerful chess engine in the world by Stockfish 17. Today we see the fish battling it out against another top engine horsey in a crazy king's Indian attack. Today we see the fish playing this beautiful attack with the white pieces, in which really crazy things will happen. Stockfish will play first of all a gambit line, will sacrifice a pawn in the early state of the game, but then will get a central pawn storm, which causes, I think, many tactical problems in horsey's defense. So let's see now what happened. Let's see now the battle between the fish and the horse. Here with the white pieces, Stockfish open with the move Nxf4 Rh8. The Zuckerdoor opening after move d5. We have now the king's in attack with the move g3. c6 horse is trying here to get first of all a fixed pawn structure on light squares, and then maybe to get the light square bishop out, and then play e6, cement the position like in the maybe reversed London system setup with this light square barricade, and then also with this powerful bishop maybe here on the move f5. We have bishop to g2, we have knight to f6, we have c4, d takes c4 by horsey, Stockfish castles, and now knight to d7. So horsey is trying to rely on this extra pawn, trying to play maybe knight to b6, also in some line maybe the move b5, or maybe even knight to b6 and maybe even bishop to e6, trying to somehow get this extra pawn protected. Stockfish continues with queen to c2. Now comes this defensive idea, and now knight to a3. Now bishop to e6, and Stockfish continues now with the calm b3. So here Stockfish cannot get the pawn back, but what Stockfish gained after c takes b3 and a takes b3 is now at least an open a file, which could be attacked, and then with knight to c4, also d4, e4 are now Stockfish ideas to get somehow these two pawns connected in the center of the board, and then somehow put more pressure against black's minor pieces in the center of the board. g6 by horsey, trying to develop, of course, a dark square bishop, e4, bishop to g7, and now bishop to b2. We have now competition here on dark squares between these two powerful bishops. Castling knight to c4, knight takes c4 becomes now a novelty in chess history. Knight to e8 has been played, then d4 in one game that I see has been also played. So it's, I think, playable for both sides, because okay, white is down a pawn but has now this massive pawn center, which is, of course, as I mentioned, simply restricting many squares in black's camp. But okay, after knight to c4, horsey took, Stockfish takes. We have now queen to c8. The idea is clear. Here black is trying to trade off the light square bishops and maybe go into a favorable endgame. We have now knight to g5, not allowing it, and also preventing, of course, bishop to h3, bishop to g4, f4, knight to e8, and now d4. And I think when we watch now this position a little bit harder, this is a good compensation for the lost pawn for the fish. 4 pawns are storming here already in the center of the board. This knight is very active. This bishop is already well placed, and also this bishop has this competition on dark squares. The rook is also active. This rook is also active, of course, on the a file. So many good strategic setups white has here for sure. I think, as I said, it's a good compensation simply for the lost pawn. And what should you do now from black's perspective? For instance, you could maybe try the move c5. Seemed tempting to me when I analyzed the game at home. Then you try h3, you kick away the bishop, and then after bishop to d7, you just continue to push. With e5, even if, for instance, c takes d4 happens, then there is this line, bishop to a3. You just try to put more pressure against this pawn. It's very hard to protect, even if you try, for instance, f6, maybe e takes f6, bishop to f6, but then bishop to d5 is also very hard to defend now for black. Knight to f7 in some lines will happen, maybe even g4 f5. So I think this could be really problematic now position here for black. Even if you try e6, then of course we step back. This rook is hanging. You will eventually lose it. So not very easy now position to defend for black. So that's why from move d4 here, queen to d7 played by horsey. Stockfish continues now with e5, knight to c7, trying of course to play knight to e6 and simply force further trades of pieces, because black was obviously trying to somehow simplify the game by trading off further material. Knight to e4 by the fish. We have rook from f to d8, and now knight to c5, queen to c8, rook to f1. Good move. Stockfish targets now the f7 weakness, and now bishop to f8 here again by Horsey. Rook to c1, rook to b8, rook to e1. So Stockfish is playing first of all with all of its pieces on the most optimal squares. Is of course searching first of all for a grid activity, and when the time is right, maybe to somehow break and enter. Especially I think the move d5 here is something that white would love to play now in the continuation of the game. Bishop to h3 here by Horsey, and now the real fun starts. Stockfish plays now immediately this move that we have discussed, d5. We have now bishop takes g2, queen takes g2, and the issue is now that you cannot actually pick up this pawn on d5. Seems tempting, but for instance, after c takes d5, knight to d5, it's leading into a devastating position. Look at this, e6. You try maybe, I don't know, so something like f takes e6, then knight to e6. Both pieces are hanging, so black is losing decisive material. It's, I think, game over here for black. Even if you try, instead of knight to d5, rook to d5 here, it's not getting better. Again, this e6 method, you're trying maybe to pass through with f6, but then g4. Look at this. The bishop on f8 is stuck. It's blocked by its own pawn. Queen to d8. You might be trying to get out of this tactical mess on the c file, but then knight to d7, the fork against the rook and the bishop, rook to c8, and then rook takes c7, for instance, in one line. Is simply winning the game on spot. The knight was, of course, the key defender of the rook. So the issue is after rook to d5 that the knight is a little bit overloaded to the defense of this very exposed rook here in the center of the board. After queen takes g2, that's why b6, Stockfish retreats. And now, again, you could maybe try c takes d5, but then after rook to d5, the issue is queen to c2 is winning the game. Even if you try something like this, then the e6, f takes e6, then queen to c3. Look at this, the battery. So again, really complicated game here for black. So that's why for knight to e4 we have now knight to e8 by Horsey. Stockfish continues now with d takes c6, and the issue for black is here that you cannot pick up now the pawn with the queen because you're running into this tactic, knight to f6, and the queen is lost. You can just give up the queen off for the knight, but it's of course obviously again a completely losing game for black. That's why queen to c7. Stockfish continues now with the f5 plan, rook from b to c8, and now e6. Again, this move that worked previously also in some other lines is simply opening up the position in front of black's king. What should you do if you try here? F takes e6, this wasn't playing the game. Then knight to g5 lead into complications. You can maybe hold this position somehow, but then this pawn is weak, this pawn is weak. I don't know. You try maybe queen to c5, then rook to e3. You just cover. Here the queen is protecting this one, and rook to d3 is not working because of the checkmate. For instance, if you try here h6 instead of queen to c5, then the knight is coming actively into the game. You're trying maybe to trade off everything, but then simply the game is over. Even if you step back with the rook, then f5 is here much better position for black, for white, pardon me, because the king is getting exposed and not a good position anymore here for black. You can maybe try to compete, but then queen to h6 is also very nasty. Queen takes g6, for instance, in some lines. Really crazy position here for white. So e6, really a brilliant move here by Stockfish, trying somehow to split the pawn chain in front of black's king. That's by f6 by Horsey, and Stockfish continues now with f5. And this move does several things. First of all, it's of course supporting the pawn on e6, but now this bishop is simply locked by its own pawn. It's really a bad bishop here by black. Queen to c6, g5, great move here. Stockfish has the initiative. Stockfish goes all in. Bishop to g7, and now bishop to a3, simply targeting this now. Even if you try, I don't know, something like g takes f5, the issue is this one is lost, and even if you pick up the knight, for instance, in the line that I've analyzed at home, g takes f6 is going to happen. You try maybe to pick up this one, but then rook to e4. Stockfish had everything under control. It could just lose the rook. I don't know, knight to f6, bishop to f6, queen to f6, and then rook to g4. It's obviously much better position here for white, with up the exchange, with this battery, with the opportunity to include other pieces into the attack. I think it's again game over here for black. After bishop to a3, that's why queen to c7. Horsey protects now this pawn. Queen to f3, king to h8, and now rook to c3. f takes g5. We have now f takes g6 here by Horsey, and now many things can be played. For instance, bishop takes c3 seems tempting, but then it's a checkmate in one. So you see how really spectacular this position is all over the board. Let's see other options instead of bishop to c3, what you could do. And my Stockfish engine at home suggests this should be black's continuation. Bishop to d4, at least you're battling somehow here in this position. King to h1, knight to f6, then knight takes f6. The issue is now bishop to f6. It's complicated because after queen to h5, there's no way that you're going to defend this position anymore. Queen to c6, and now after king to g1, you just can prolong the game. But now even after queen to d or rook to d1, the queen will get back, and now the game is over. You just can prolong the game maybe by playing h takes g6, but now look at it, the rook is coming, queen is coming, so you just can sacrifice the queen and, as I said, prolong a little bit the game, but nothing is working. Instead of here the line bishop to f6 that we have discussed, even if you try e takes f6, then maybe rook to d3, and now I think the issue is this passer on the e file, bishop to e5, rook to d1. You're trying maybe to trade off everything, but now this pass pawn is very hard to defend. The bishop is controlling the potential check here, so obviously I would say again a messy position here for black. Although this is the line, this last line that Stockfish is suggesting that black should go for. Stockfish says it's a +1 evaluation here for white, but maybe black can somehow hold the position and hope for a draw, maybe with, I don't know, rook to e8, and then, I don't know, rook to d8 leads into a very complicated position. But as I said, here king to g7 can be played. I've just analyzed a little bit the position further. For instance, rook to e8, if that happens, then there is a beautiful idea of queen takes queen to a2 with a checkmate threat, so you would be forced to bring the bishop in between. But then after a couple more moves, look at this, this was the suggested line for Stockfish how to hold this position. You just go here with the check, and then after a couple more moves you can play this perpetual idea and maybe squeeze a draw out of this position. So this just one line. Of course, white doesn't have to necessarily play the game like this, but I wanted to show you that Stockfish always finds at least some kind of an idea. But instead of this move bishop to d4 that we have said was the best move here for black, here Horsey tried g4, which is simply not working. Stockfish gets now the queen very active here on f7. Bishop to d4 comes now, rook to e3. You don't have time, of course, to pick up here the piece, because after rook to e3 there's no good defense against this checkmate threat. Here you're trying, I don't know, knight to g7, then bishop to b2. Look at this, the position is really collapsing here for black. Rook to g8 is not working because after something like this, knight to g5 and similar stuff. So really a bad position for black. So after rook to e3, that's why knight to g7 here by Horsey. Stockfish continues now with bishop to e7. You cannot really play rook to e8 because then bishop to f6, bishop to f6, knight to f6. Again, you don't have such a good score here for the rook to f8, for instance. If happens, then you can pass through, even if this one is taken. Then g takes f7 would actually connect now both of these pawns, and again a promotion will happen. Again, game over here for black. After bishop to f6, maybe you can try knight to f6 and then queen to e7, but then, I don't know, rook to e5, a6, and then you just pick up the rook with up the exchange with this massive situation here in the center of the board with his progressive pawns on the 6 ranks already. Again, a massive game, I would say, here for black. So after bishop to e7, that's why h takes g6 has to be played here by Horsey. Stockfish simply took now the exchange. We have now a simplification. Queen takes f7, e takes f7, and now here Horsey again found an interesting defensive idea, because still this rook is pinned by the bishop. Stockfish steps back, bishop takes e3, rook takes e3, and it seems so that black has defended this position because the black's pieces are close enough to the action. The king is always there, and here black is also an interesting situation with this passer on the a file. But it's really impressive for me how Stockfish can calculate these positions in such depth, because many things really happened, many problems we saw, many defensive ideas, many tactical sequence that could have happened, maybe black missed, but Stockfish calculated everything and says this position is winning here for white, although this pawn on f7 is a seemingly weak pawn. Actually, it's so progressive because look at this knight to f5 here by a horsey trying to get the king closer to the action, but now a brilliant rook to d3. Crazy idea. Obviously, of course, if you pick it up, then the promotion will happen and it's game over. It's not only game over, you get checkmated here after knight to g5. It would be a spectacular checkmate. So even if you try, for instance, rook to f8 here, seems also tempting. Then knight to g5, and then you get the king closer, but then knight to e6 is a beautiful fork against the rook and the king, and again, it's in a winning game. Even if you try, I don't know, knight to h6 to bring the knight closer, then rook to d7. Again, obviously you cannot get the king closer because of the same knight to e6 problem. But then even if you try, I don't know, something like a5, the issue is here that black's pieces are paralyzed, and actually white can go simply closer with the king here. Even if you try king to g7, as we said, knight to d3 is going to happen. And even if you try rook to a8 here to support maybe your passer here, then rook to a7. Again, this tricky idea, sacrificing the piece deflected from the 8th rank, and then promotion comes with, of course, check, and it would be again a completely winning position here for Stockfish. You maybe can try rook to f8, but now the king is closer, and that's the issue. Black's pieces are somehow paralyzed. Again, you cannot play king to g7 because, as we mentioned, knight to e6 is winning the game. You maybe try to deliver check, but suddenly white's king is getting closer and closer, and in one moment the position will simply collapse here for black. So really crazy position. So after rook to d3, great move, rook to a8 here by horsey, trying to put more pressure immediately here on the a file. Stockfish continues with knight to g5, knight to h6, king to e2. If you try again, king to g7 here, seems also tempting. Then rook to d7 is a huge threat because after a5, again, knight to e6. In one moment you have to step back, but then f8, the promotion is obviously again completely winning here for white. That's why after king to e2, knight takes f7 had to be played now. Finally by horsey, Stockfish picks it up. We have king to g7, knight to e5, and now knight to g4. We're reaching out this endgame in which obviously white is completely winning. We have now king to e4. This pawn is protected. We have now rook to d5, rook to h4, rook to g5, and Stockfish simply grabs another pawn here after rook takes g6, king to f5, rook takes b6, and now okay, king takes g4, but now the king is simply far away from the action. Stockfish went for this one, has now completely winning endgame. Here you have to play king to e6, but now Stockfish supports everything here, will bring the rook behind, and after king to d6 now comes this idea. Stockfish simply gets the king closer, and after a couple more moves here, horsey resigned here after rook to g8. The issue is obviously that in one moment we'll simply get the king here, go slowly but surely with the support of the king, push the pawn further, and the king is always stuck here. You have to be careful because black is going to be challenged, of course, on the queen side. White is going to push the pawn. In one moment, you can maybe grab the c pawn, but then the king is so far away from the action. Even if you get this pawn in after potential trades of rooks, obviously this passer is going to be unstoppable for black. So it was a fair resign here by the horsey chess engine. So interesting game here by Stockfish in a crazy King's Indian attack where Stockfish sacrificed the pawn, but eventually put more pressure with the central pawn storm. Found really interesting ideas. First of all, the c6 attack, then e6, trying to open some spaces somehow in front of black's king. Really a perfect game here again by the strongest chess engine by Stockfish 17. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this idea. I think it's an idea that can be applied in your preparation. Maybe if you're a Zuckertor King's Indian attack player, maybe some of these positions you can get out of Catalan also. I think this is a Catalanish game. If you're a fan of the Catalan, I think this was really instructive game for you. So, okay, if you want to see some other beautiful chess games played by Stockfish and also by some other top engines, check out our commented chess games played by computer series. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.